So this is a death threat. You see, a fellow who was calling himself Moses after escaping from a maximum security prison deep in the jungles of the Democratic Republic of Congo was terrorizing the local populations, poaching wildlife, and trying to accumulate guns. He also issued a death threat to any conservationists working in the area of the Lomami River, which is exactly where I was heading, to collect elephant DNA. The DNA would be used to track seized shipments of illegal ivory and track those shipments back to the source populations. And this X, scratched on the ground, proved that Moses' men had been able to sneak up just outside of the field station that I was about to arrive at and scratch their message on the ground. Thankfully, we had a capable crew of a military escort of 4 who were able to outsmart an armed ambush, capture 2 poachers and a rapist who they tied up and put in the back of the dugout canoe we were traveling in, which was weird. Obviously, we were in a dangerous situation. We'd put ourselves there. And when you put yourself in that sort of a situation, you have to make good choices, because that is what keeps you alive. You have to take that and manage that risk in a way that is healthy, safe, and responsible. And sometimes that's a challenge when you have funders, you have media, and you have the internet wanting you to succeed, putting on real or perceived pressure. I had learned a lot about risk before arriving in the Congo. Most of my adult life I'd spent as a professional whitewater kayaker. I'd traveled the world running some of the tallest waterfalls in the world. And that's me. Some people said that they didn't believe that that was me at first. It is. And running some of the highest volume rapids in the world. In fact, National Geographic included me in their Risktakers section in the 150th anniversary issue. And thanks. Yeah. And sometimes hyperbole helps us see things that we would look right past normally. And that's certainly the case for me when talking about risk. You see, whitewater kayaking, when done right, is a series of calculated risks. It's a great metaphor for life. And so what I'm going to talk about right now, this morning, is the process that I use to navigate those risks and create a practice of responsible risk-taking. As you scout a rapid that you're considering running, you're confronted with a choice. Am I going to take this risk and run the rapid, or am I going to walk around it? And to make that risk responsibly, to make that choice responsibly, you have to look at all of the hazards. You have to know what they are and why they scare you. All of those things that could hurt you. You have to stare that fear in the face. You have to analyze each of those hazards and take that knowledge, turn that fear into some knowledge that can help you make good, healthy decisions. I think of holding that in my fear hand. Next, you have to think of why you want to run that rapid in the first place, why you want to take that risk, and you have to take ego out of the equation. Maybe you want to impress your friends. Maybe you've got some camera courage going because you're on a film shoot. Certainly happened to me before. Whatever it is, you have to acknowledge that as legitimate and real and part of being human, so you can hold that in your ego hand and separate it out from your decision. So once you've done that, separated your fear and your ego, you've got to check in with yourself. You've got to listen to your gut and your intuition. Can I run this rapid safely? And this can be tricky because you have to honestly listen to yourself and be confident that you can make that decision without listening to your fear or your ego. So once you've done that, you've set aside ego, fear, checked in with yourself, and you've decided to go for it. You're going to run the rapid. There's this moment of amazing clarity and freedom that I find pretty euphoric and really rare. And when you take that first stroke, imagine it with me. You take that first stroke that fully commits you to a decision that you've made wholly on your own. That's one of the most empowering experiences I've ever felt in my entire life. As risk takers, we go through this process frequently, even if it's often unconscious. We create a practice of responsible risk-taking. And when you do that, in that moment is fleeting and it's hard to hold on to. But I believe when we're really able to separate fear and ego and listen to our true selves, that is when we are able to reach our greatest potential, on or off the river. It's when we unlock our creativity and our passion. And I believe that's when we're able to do what we're here on this earth to do. As I traveled the world, taking these risks, making films, seeing myself in magazines, I began to hear this little voice from my gut, from my heart, saying, you're not reaching your full potential. This isn't what you're here on this earth to do. And when things are working pretty well, that's the last thing you want to hear, right? But I began to realize that as I traveled to some of the most beautiful places in the world, the pristine river canyons, the beautiful streams, and just flowing through the jungle, I also had to travel through some of the most destroyed places in the world. The clear-cut logging, the strip mines, and the dams. I began to realize that to just tell a story about exciting whitewater and beautiful natural scenery, it began to feel dishonest. I wasn't telling the whole story. I didn't want to show up in a location, build relationships with people and the place that they live in just long enough to get my story out and never return. Sure, I might inspire some folks by showing the natural beauty of the place, but I wanted my work to have measurable outcomes, to help create meaningful change for the better. And I realized that I couldn't do all of these things at the same time well. I couldn't possibly listen to my heart and commit myself fully to being a professional whitewater kayaker. I had to stop being that person, and that was terrifying. That, to me, felt risky. Over and over again, I'd paddled really tall waterfalls that were terrifying to most folks, giant rapids, and I'd felt that healthy fear, that fear that keeps you alive and that makes you feel alive. But now, I felt lost in fear and indecision. I was trying to change this identity that I'd built for myself of being that extreme sport, big deal kayaker guy, and trade that for something unknown to me. But the more I went through this process, the more I listened to my heart, and I worked to separate fear and ego from my decisions, the more my path became clear. And so now, I run a production company called Balance Media. We do half commercial and television work, and the other half of our time is spent doing environmental and social justice storytelling, with the goal of helping folks figure out how to interact in a smart and meaningful way with the world around us. And I love it. I love waking up every morning because I feel like I'm doing what I'm here to do. I feel like I'm pushing myself and reaching for my full potential. And it was that risk, it was taking that risk, redeveloping, reinventing the work that I do that allowed me to follow my heart. That came quick. That allowed me to follow my heart in a way that I feel is good for me and good for the planet. But sometimes, just storytelling isn't enough. And that's why I had to go to the Congo. And after 3 days in a dugout canoe, 2 days on a motorbike, a few skirmishes, and 4 days of walking in the jungle, we found what we were looking for. Big, juicy, wet piles of elephant poop. which we sent back to the lab to analyze and extract the DNA. And that DNA is now used to help inform the international effort to stop elephant poaching. We're faced with a lot of problems today. Social justice issues like racism, gender equality, and climate change. Environmental issues like species extinction, water pollution, and climate change. I believe that if we all play our parts, we can solve a lot of these issues. I believe in order to do that, we're going to have to create a culture of responsible risk takers. So I'm here today to encourage all of you to push past your fear, push past your ego, and lean into the risks that living in this world and this culture asks us to take. Because I think you'll all be healthier, and we'll all be happier if you do. So thanks a lot.